Alright then, we've been keeping a close track on the transfer activity. Shane's been updating you guys as to what's happening in the English Premier League in particular. And there's one name that's garnered a lot of attention.
Yeah.
But there's development on that front as well. And we are here to discuss about what this development could really mean for both Manchester United and Chelsea. Of course, we're talking about Mason Mount, who was getting all the attention from Manchester United over the last 8 to 10 days, rather a little more than that. It was made more than evident that Manchester United are interested in Mason Mount, but after getting 3 bids rejected from the London club, Manchester United are saying that we're going to be looking elsewhere. Shane and I are here to talk about that, if at all Manchester United did the right thing or not, and if that 55 million plus price tag that Chelsea are seeking as of now, if that makes for a justified price tag or not. Opening comments, Shane, when we look at this development?
Opening comments, I'll start with a funny one. You're the United fan, I'm the Chelsea fan, and we're wearing reverse colours. In fact, you're wearing city blue, which is even funnier.
Which is even
all
sadder.
things considered. But see, opening developments, look, it's been no secret that Mount wants to leave. It's been a thing. If you're talking about how it is that the contract was going, it was basically put in front of him by the new management. Then it was pulled back because I think there were some issues with, the relations between the new board, the new ownership and Mount. And Mount obviously is someone who, there's definitely a special attraction towards him as a youth academy graduate. In fact, if you look at the last wave of youth academy players who really broke through under Frank Lampard in the 2019-20 season, Mount, Tammy Abraham, Fikayo Tomori. I mean, Mount was the last one standing from that bunch because again, Tammy was sold for a profit to Roma. Fikayo Tomori went to AC Milan. Mount was that one player who many thought would become the mainstay. Now, to reach a point where he's on the last year of his deal, and you could potentially lose him for nothing in a year. I was initially a little surprised that Chelsea were knocking back 50 odd mil. It was very surprising to read because I'm like, okay, I get the logistics of it that, he's someone who you didn't spend any money on because you pretty much developed him from scratch. But again, for 1 year left, if you're getting 50 odd mil, that's a lot of money.
For one, when I was... Of course, I was interested. That name did interest me to a great extent, but not an awful lot, I would say.
No.
Enough to, let's say, know that, Mason Mount could be, because Manchester United, right now, the way season ended for them, they are looking at an extended or a deeper bench strength, let's say. That is something that they really lacked last year and they only want to develop. So, probably Mason Mount wouldn't have been that player who would have featured, let's say, in all Premier League games. But even then, you do expect him to be taking part in most games at some point. Besides that, you expect Mason Mount to be starting, let's say, in your other competitions as well.
Truth be told, I would have seen him as a starter. You know why? Because if you would have Casemiro at the base of your midfield, your advanced mids or your number 8s would be Eriksen and Mount.
But
because
again,
the other option is Fred.
Exactly. You would agree that Mason Mount would have some edge over the likes of a McTominay and a Fred. But having said that, when you're looking at a midfield which comprises of Eriksen and Casemiro, you've got a Fernandes who plays.
I forget about Fernandes.
So when you have Fernandes over there, that's where, you see that Mason Mount may not necessarily make it to the 11 because you've got Sancho on the left, you've got Antony on the right, and you've got Rashford up front. So you're looking at that composition. That's where I feel that, okay, that would be the best 11 for Manchester United in the Premier League. You could look at something else, let's say in the Carling Cup or the now EFL Cup as it's called. The Carabao Cup, or let's say the FA Cup. So you could be looking, and Mason Mount makes for a very good player in that scenario. Very, very good player in that scenario. But that price tag is something I, after a point, was not okay with. 55 million for me, even
for a player who can be available for free next year. By the way.
For a player who can be available for free, also you get that feeling that even after it crossed the 50 million mark, for me it was more of, let's say, the English tax you were paying to Chelsea
100%.
than, let's say, paying value for money for that player, let's say, which is anyway like a far-fetched concept these days. Nowadays, you don't know if there's
what is value
for money player, or if then that's the thing with how things have been operating over the last
particularly for Premier League clubs.
Pretty, It's Manchester United have been that club anyway over the last few transfer windows who've been more than desperate. Right now, Manchester United finishing third, being winners of the Carabao Cup, making it to the final of the FA Cup as well. When you put all of that together, maybe that desperation, they're not reeking of desperation, let's say, in as far as the transfer market is concerned, and they've been mellow, let's say, as far as transfer activity also goes. But I, for one, was extremely happy that Manchester United pulled the plug after a point, and they were very clear with that 55 million bid to Chelsea that okay, you either take it or you leave it.
Because I think it's the exact opposite that you've seen from United in recent years, wherein they'd get desperate, not pull out on time, and then end up overpaying. I think a good example for that matter would be, if I remember correctly, Jadon Sancho. Because they went for him hard in the summer of 2020, didn't get him. Then 1 year later, you went back for him and had to pay 20 million more than what was originally
Same
planned.
with Antony, I would say. You know, though Ajax
they had to overbid nicely for him
exactly.
too. Yes.
And Ajax also, you know, they held their ground very, very firmly. And because Manchester United had made more than clear, and Erik ten Hag, you know, he wanted to make that signing. He'd just come from there only. So it was made, and you know, you had given an impression which allowed an Ajax to be in that position that they can command that kind of money.
Exactly.
Right now, what this does is, what this position that Manchester United in this transfer saga have done is that they have made it clear that we are not just in for Mason Mount, we are looking elsewhere, which is where you have names like Maddison now coming up, you have names like Eze coming up, you're also looking at alternatives like Caicedo, you're looking at Moises Caicedo. So Manchester United are making clear to Chelsea that listen, if Mason Mount is not the only option for us. Listen, we can go elsewhere shopping too. Though again, the thing will be whether Manchester United want to give that 60 million money for Maddison or for Mount. Leicester being relegated, they value him very highly. They want that 60 million because that money will mean a lot to a relegated club now.
Exactly, and that's the real question. Is that I understand them walking away, but are you getting a better deal elsewhere? You're not, because Maddison, we know for a fact the price being touted for even clubs like Newcastle and Tottenham is 60 million pounds flat. Caicedo will be even worse, and trust me, as a Chelsea fan, I can tell you Brighton drive a hard bargain. Remember, Brighton players, they drive a hard bargain. They are masters at two things. One, creating a perception about a player. Two, then cashing in when that perception is at an all-time high. They got 60 million for Cucurella, man. Mark Cucurella. No disrespect, but I remember even when I signed him, okay, I understand we need a left back. But why are you paying 60 million pounds to sign someone who's going to be a backup to Ben Chilwell? It's just bad spending all around. And you know, fair credit to Brighton. They took full advantage. I'm not taking anything away from them. But again, Caicedo is going to cost 80 mil.
Given that transfer, in fact, I was expecting Mac Allister to go for much more than he eventually ended up going for.
Yeah, but his deal was running down also.
Yes.
That's the other difference.
That's the thing.
With Caicedo also, I think he has, 2 years left. But 80 mil, again, Caicedo, 80 mil. And again, I'll say this, by the way, Chelsea have been linked to Caicedo, Arsenal have also been linked to him. 80 million, I'm still not sure he's an 80 million player. I think this is a case of, Brighton being able to very nicely maneuver the market situation, get 3 clubs interested. How is it that they were able to get 60 million from Chelsea for Cucurella? Because City were interested. Chelsea knew they had to pay big to try and outdo what it is that maybe City could have done.
Caicedo, it's also the fact that, he performed well in the big games. Some of the big games.
Against Arsenal.
Against Arsenal, one cannot forget. So again, it's his performances in the big games that really sort of set him apart and give Brighton that sort of leverage in this whole transfer saga to allow them to ask for that kind of a price tag. But having said that, as far as coming back to what we really were looking at, which is Mason Mount, he would definitely want this move. We all know. I think it's almost public knowledge now.
It's a given at this point that he is either taking the move this year or next year. It's either going to be for a price this year or on a free next year.
It's all about how Chelsea really, because for a new for a new owner, let's say, I don't think money is an issue at Chelsea at the moment.
No, it is. Let me go into details here as to why. Why it's an issue is because Chelsea spent a lot of money.
Yeah, you need to be selling players to be able to balance the books, and so that those financial fair play rules don't sort of begin to kick in and bother the club over there. You don't want that as a new owner. But again, having said that, what you also are looking at is getting rid of some of the players who've been part of the regime for a while, because you're also looking at a fresh template as far as Chelsea are concerned.
Two things, yes, you're right. Fresh template. Second thing, get big earners off the books. Why I think they're playing hardball for Mount is for 2 reasons. One, he's not a high earner. His salary is pretty basic right now. So they
what
even
150k?
100. Not even this thing. He was one of the lowest earners from the entire group, which is one of the reasons why he was pushing so hard for a better improved contract. So there's that. Second is that Chelsea, we were talking about outgoings. they've sealed pretty much a deal to sell Havertz.
Yeah.
Two birds with one stone there, by the way. Not only are they getting good money back for him, he was also a high earner. Khalidou Koulibaly off the books, gone to Al Hilal, very big earner. He was making 300k a week for being a bench player in essence. 300k a week there, trimmed from the thing. Hakim Ziyech, another one on high wages, set to depart. Edouard Mendy, another one on relatively high wages, set to depart. Chelsea are not just actually removing players for the sake of bringing in funds, they're also doing it to trim the wage bill. If they keep Mount for another year, it doesn't cost them that much. They've got the signings or the leverage wherein there is, they've sold out enough players at this point that they don't need to worry about the money aspect.
But with Mount, thing was also, I was looking at his numbers, he made some 24 appearances in the Premier League last year. Just got 3 goals and I think some 3 assists as well.
See, I think it's unfair. I'll tell you this one thing is that do not judge any player, any Chelsea player
players
of last year.
Exactly.
It was a terrible year.
Exactly. Which is why I think, and that's something that the clubs also around, who are showing interest in Chelsea players do recognize that fact. They do acknowledge the fact.
Why else is Kai Havertz going for 65 million?
Exactly. Because again, with both Mount and Havertz, I would say, Havertz more so because, Havertz in those couple of games where he got those back-to-back goals, he showed glimpses.
Yeah, and he's always shown glimpses.
Exactly, he's shown glimpses, and with Arsenal, with this move now happening, you expect greater game time for him because again, the thing with most Chelsea players in the season gone by was the fact that there wasn't a consistent run given to most players.
Yeah, because you had more than 30 first team players.
And you had multiple managers in the same year. With
4.
Exactly.
Jesus.
So multiple managers, you were looking at multiple philosophies. But with Mason Mount, the thing also is that he comes in with a fair bit of international experience. He comes in with a fair bit of Premier League
Also, don't
experience.
forget, he counts in the homegrown quota. It's
Exactly.
also important.
And the homegrown quota, as Shane rightly says, and the fact that, of course, whatever price you will be paying for him or whichever club ends up bidding for him, you will be paying those extra bucks because he happens to be an Englishman. We've seen that. It's an established fact. You saw it with somebody like a Grealish just about 2 seasons back, and it's now a known.
Calvin Phillips.
Calvin Phillips as well. We could be seeing him again.
In fact, for that matter, even Declan Rice, the amount of money
that's been asked
talked
for him
about
as well.
is insane, and it's of course largely due to the fact.
And these are 24-year-olds we're talking about.
Exactly. So it's a crazy time to be in the transfer market. I can't imagine how much a Phil Foden would go for if he ever decided
today's
to.
Day and age,
Today's day and age, he's a 120 million player. Easy. But so I think if you look at it, there's no right or wrong answer here. But there's another thing which I think you have to remember with United and why they're probably not willing to go much higher is that United need to sell before they buy. They've not sold anyone yet.
The thing with Manchester United also is, and I don't see the situation improving from a Manchester United standpoint.
Takeover.
Is the takeover, you don't know where it stands as of now. 2 is the fact that if you see United haven't made great money or any good money on any of the players that they've sold.
Yeah, actually that's one
Dan
record.
James was the only player you booked some profit on.
But that's it.
And that's it. So even if Manchester United are to clear, some of the players in the present lot, you're looking at somebody like a McTominay, you're looking at somebody like a Fred. I don't quite think Manchester United will get rid of De Gea, but that's not to say that he'll be the number 1 next year. You're looking at bringing in a new keeper as well. But if at all, let's say hypothetically, if De Gea also was to be put in the market, you're not getting a lot of money for him.
No, what market? He's out of contract.
Exactly.
He's going for free.
So you're not looking at a lot of money that Manchester United can really get from sales at the moment.
Exactly, that's part of the problem. But you still need to sell.
Yeah.
That's the reality of how FFP has made the market. Is that you need to sell. It doesn't have to be big money. You don't necessarily have to look to make a profit, but you have to look to generate X amount per year so that you can say that this much we've had income is. Because again, see, this is where accounting tricks come into play. What is the deal when it comes to Chelsea's amortization? They can amortize all those lengths over 6-7 years, but any player that they sell, so say they sell Mount for say 60 million, that 60 million counts in the year. So they'll have the amortization of all those, and then they can just counterbalance that with 2 or 3 sales, which is why player sales is very, very important. And it's the same for United as well. With United, you're talking about them not getting value. I think United were the kings at ironically killing value. Why? Because they would have this policy of constantly triggering 1-year extensions, then not being able to sell the player. Pogba bought for 80 million, let go on a free. Phil Jones bought for like 20-30 million, gone for
But
a
all
free.
those years back.
All those years back, but he was someone who they kept extending his contract.
Yeah.
And I used to wonder why.
No, nobody has that. That's another mystery. Just like, let's say in cricket, you have that mystery as to why Yuzi Chahal wasn't played in the 2022.
No one understands why this is happening.
Why has Phil Jones been around this whole while?
Now
like,
I think he's
it's
finally
not even been like, you know, that he's been a lucky charm for United. He, by the way, is one of the two players around right now from that
From
squad,
the Fergie era.
from the Fergie era, and from that squad that ended up winning the title in 12-13. The other player happens to be David De Gea,
Who himself could be on the way out.
It's been a clear out. I just want to take one question before we wrap this, Shane. Sham is asking, are these names that we just talked about, are these just names that are being used by Manchester United to pressure Chelsea?
No, I think these are midfielders who are available.
Available, exactly. I don't quite think that this is pressure tactic, because even Chelsea know, for that matter, how, you know, or who else is available.
Exactly.
And Mason Mount, like we said again, it's not like, you know, last season or even the season before that where he got about 10-11 goals, really set the stage on fire, or, you know, Manchester United, because you're not looking at, if Manchester United were, let's say, finishing, or had they finished 6th or 7th and they were looking at a better finish, maybe they would have been tempted more to go for Mount. But now Manchester United finished 3rd and they're pushing for much more this year. So they're really looking at quality players, and they're really, you know, this isn't a pressure tactic, let's say.
It isn't. In fact, another interesting one, in fact, Sham Vartak also says there is Chelsea was in desperation to sell him. No. As I pointed out, Chelsea actually are in no need to sell him now, which is why the club are playing hardball and saying, you want to pay this money.
Both clubs, in fact, you know, both clubs, you know, because from what you're getting to hear from Manchester United is that they rather made it very clear when they put in the 3rd bid
that
this is a take it or a leave it, you know, deal as well. And which Chelsea, as reports suggest, have declined as things stand. Whether or not, you know, there is a renegotiation over there, we'll have to wait and watch. But Chen, any closing comments?
I mean, see, this is one of those deals where I don't think there's a wrong answer here.
Yeah.
I think Chelsea as the selling club here, considering what we know about the transfer moves they're going to be making in terms of outgoings, well within their rights to stand their ground. Similarly, United also well within the rights to stand their ground and say, why do we need to pay 60 odd million for a player who's going to be available for a free anyway? So I think United, for once, by the way, have made a very commendable call, because they end up getting desperate and end up overpaying. You've seen it happen. You've seen it happen with many players in the past. Someone
with Lukaku, it happened. I remember overpaying for Lukaku.
Exactly.
Overpaid for Lukaku as well, for Pogba as well. With Alexis Sanchez, let's not forget. So
Sanchez, my God, that was the worst.
Let's not forget all those transfers. Having said that, Anthony, let's say most recently, it was also very clear that he was Manchester United's only target last summer. So again, when that narrative sort of kicks in, clubs are only going to be you know, drawing benefit out of it. But the right messaging, as far as Old Trafford's concerned, I think the right message being sent across from Old Trafford. But Chelsea, as Shane rightly said, well within their rights to be commanding that price, because and be holding on to a player as well who might just play some role in this year as well. But that we'll have to wait. Well, thank you so much, guys. Many of you tuned in. We could take some of the comments, some of them we missed out, but we'll be going through most of them after we're done with this video. Don't forget, we're coming back in say about 40 minutes. There's a interesting discussion, cricket-based discussion, that on Sarfaraz Khan's
our live dugout
exclusion. So yeah, Nikhil will be here. Hopefully Rahul as well. We're going to be joining you then. Thanks a lot.